see you guys in the dark.
Well, this is about my first and only real stalker. A couple of guys were uber pushy after, but this guy changed my worldview. Here is the story. When I was 17, I had some serious issues with my folks and moved out of the house. I happened to have a couple of friends already living together, so I moved in with them. It actually worked out great because one of the girls and I were working at the same place, so I could ride with her to and from work, and that was great because I had no car. For a 17-year-old out on her own for the first time, it wasn't a bad setup. Anyways, let me explain my environment. The neighborhood we lived in was a historical neighborhood. It wasn't extremely poor, but it was mostly working class. People who lived there were ranged from older people who had paid their homes off and were staying put, to terrible lowlifes who beat on each other and sold drugs on the corner. Pretty diverse. Most people were pretty good and stayed to themselves, though. We lived on the main street in this neighborhood. This main street ran perpendicular to another main street that ran off a nearby interstate. Our street, being the main street of the neighborhood, had tons of side streets running off of it. Just like most neighborhoods, some, but not all, of the housing blocks had alleys in between the homes that you could drive on because some of the houses' driveways were in the back. The roads were pretty busy, and the area is well populated. I hope this describes the area well enough. Oh, and let's just call my street Main Street for ease. Also of note, there was a gas station about 4 blocks down the road, on the main street. We called it the Haji store. We'd often walk there, alone or together, to purchase cigarettes and snacks. We were underage, but life. About a mile or so up one of the side streets, you can walk and get to a couple of fast food restaurants, other businesses, and a Winn-Dixie grocery store. We'll call this street not Main Street, just for giggles. There was another busy street you could cross at the end of not Main Street to get to a shopping center, which I later came to work in. This will be important, I promise. Okay, back to me. As a 17-year-old, I thought I was pretty invincible. I was young and reasonably attractive, I guess, and therefore got hit on by guys a lot. Well, the house that we lived in had a great front porch with a swing. My friend and I would sit outside and smoke, sometimes go in the front yard, and guys riding or walking by would hit on us. No big deal. It was mostly harmless and didn't really bother us. We were used to it. We even had a guy buy us beer and cigarettes one day, and actually didn't expect anything in return. Legitimately, that was nice. Anyways, as I didn't have a car, I walked often. Sometimes alone, and sometimes with a group of friends. One day I was walking with 2 of my friends to the Haji store. As we were walking, a car drove past us, and kind of slowed down. But then it kept going. It was late 80s, early 90s model Honda Civic, and it was a reddish color with a green passenger side door. It drove up to the main busy road that off-street. And then it turned. We got to the store and bought our stuff. The store was just a few blocks from our house, so the walk took maybe 15 minutes to get there and back. When we came out of the store, we saw the same car pull up to the gas pumps. Still not worried, but the guy gets out and is staring at us. We didn't think too much of it and just kept walking back to the house. Now it was hot outside. We were all wearing short shorts. It's the South, damn it. And some variation of a t-shirt. I must mention that I have a tattoo of my name on the middle of my thigh, thus very visible when I wear short shorts. As we're walking, we're talking, laughing, just goofing off like teenagers do. We didn't notice, but the guy in the red car drove by on the opposite side of the road. When we were almost to the house, he drove back by us on the side of the road we were walking on. This time he stopped. He said something like, "Hey girls, I'm Marcus. What you up to?" We responded in some semblance of just walking. He asks, "What's y'all's names?" My friend's lucky things are able to throw out some fake names. He looks at my thigh before I can say a thing and says, "I know. You must be Caitlin." Shit. He was some kind of weird. Seemed like he was high on something that wasn't weed. He didn't seem drunk, just off. He was definitely giving off some bad vibes. I was too high or something to come up with something smart, or clever to throw him off. So I was just like, yeah. He asks if we can get into something. We brush him off, and he drives away. So we go back to my place, hang out, smoke our cigarettes or whatever we wanted, and forgot all about him. Well, about this time, my friend that I ride to work with has decided to move out and stops working at the place that I work at. So I either have to find a ride or find a new job. I actually knew someone that worked at a pizza place in the shopping center up the road, the one I mentioned earlier. He got me a job, so I could walk to work back and forth pretty easily, and I knew the guy. Also free pizza. I was pleased. He was a cool manager, and there was also a really cool assistant manager who I got pretty close with. We'll call her Amy. I started working a lot and would walk back and forth to work most of the time. I would come in sometimes around 9 and leave at 1, then come back at 4 or 5 and work as long as they needed me. I made a pretty good bit of money. And at night, since it was kind of shady in the area, the delivery drivers would sometimes give me a ride home. It was nice. I was happy. Didn't think about the crazy stalker guy ever. He was thinking of me, though. One night, probably around 7 or 8 p.m., when it was close to dark, but not quite dark, I was walking home from work. I was on not Main Street, and it was kind of nice. There wasn't a lot of traffic or people, so I was just enjoying the walk, smoking my Newports. I noticed the car on one of the streets running off of Not Main. It looks vaguely familiar. After I pass it, I noticed the green door. Huh, I think to myself. That weird guy must live near here. Well, as soon as I passed that street, I was on the opposite side of Not Main from that car. I noticed that it was moving. The car pulled off, and I guess went off into another street. I kept walking and didn't really worry about it. He circled back around and headed up the street towards me. I was a bit nervous now. Why would he be circling? He passed me and then turned down another street and disappeared. I picked up the pace to get home, hoping that I wouldn't see him again. Well, no such luck. He circled around somewhere else and pulled up beside me, cruising along next to me. Pretty creepy. He starts to chit-chat, but I just brush him off. I tell him I now have a boyfriend, and I'm not interested in talking to anyone else. Often these guys say something along the lines of, well, he doesn't have to know. And he does. Which is annoying and stupid, and I tell him so. He gets a bit huffy, calls me a bitch, and drives off. I'm pretty creeped out, so I hurry home and lock the door. I remember thinking to myself that I needed to walk other ways from now on. Fast forward a week or so. I mentioned before I was kind of close to the assistant manager at work, Amy. She was super sweet, and we would have a good time joking around a lot. Well, one morning at work, she's joking on me, saying that I must be a player because I've got some guy calling me at work when she knows the guy that I'm dating. I asked what she meant, because I had a cell phone and no one ever called me at work. Apparently, this Marcus guy had been calling my job asking for me for a while now. She had always just told him I wasn't there, and he never left a message. I told her what had happened. She agreed to just tell him I quit if he called again. We debated calling the cops, but they wouldn't do anything when all we had was his name. We'd work it out, we figured. By now I was super weirded out. Like I said before, I'd never had anything like this happen to me, so it was very disconcerting. I began to get even more paranoid and would no longer walk home at night and try not to walk to work during the day. It was sometimes unavoidable, and over the next few weeks, I often saw his car while walking, either to work or to somewhere else. It was creepy, but I had started carrying a pocket knife and taking different routes, in those alleys, etc., so as to avoid him as much as I could. I felt like I could deal with the situation, but that I could just still stay on guard. One Friday night, I had to work until 10 p.m. There were only a couple of us in the store, being Amy and me, and the delivery drivers that were in and out all night. I was finishing up cleaning and getting ready to go to a house party with my friends. Well, I was sweeping the front lobby and happened to glance out in the parking lot. What do I see but that stupid red Honda Civic with a green door? This motherfucker is watching me at work. I was so scared, but I couldn't do much. I ended up hiding in the office until he left, and my ride arrived. I left after checking to be sure that he was gone, and then rode with my friends to the party. We hung out, smoked, had a good time. I got a little tipsy, and had all forgotten about the creepy stalker, Marcus. It got really late, and I knew that I had to work early. I tried asking for a ride, but people were either asleep, or too high, or drunk to drive. I didn't have a choice but to walk. I got a friend to agree to walk part of the way with me, because while I wasn't far from home, it was still a couple of miles or so, and it was late. So he walked with me until he got to the main road, which was only about 3/4 of a mile to my house. My friend and I said our goodbyes, and I started the last leg of the walk. There were a few cars out, but not many, and some were cops, so I was okay. I passed the Haji store, so I'm really close to home now. I lit up a cigarette for the last few blocks, feeling pretty good and happy that I was almost home. Then that fucking car comes up the road. I noticed it immediately as he drives under a streetlight. I froze up, trying to decide what to do. It was past midnight, and there was no traffic on the road right then besides him. Luckily, I thought, he just slowed down and stared at me and went on. But then he busted a U-turn in the middle of the road. I threw my Newport down and started running. I decided to run to the alleyway in between some houses on the block next to me. I was going as fast as I could, because though I wasn't in terrible shape, I smoked a lot, and I couldn't breathe. I was only a couple of blocks from home. Surely I could make it. Then he pulls in the alley on the other side of the block. I was trapped. I felt like I could get killed or raped or something even worse. I remember crying and thinking what I could do for defense. He threw his car in park and tried to hop out of his car, but I ran around the passenger side. And something dawned on me. I saw his tag, and I yelled out the number 2 or 3 times so that he could hear me, and that I could remember it. I think he was pissed off about that, because he yelled something like, "Stupid bitch, I'm gonna get you," got back in his car. I ran as fast as I could, rounded the corner, and got back on the main road. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't go home because he'd seen me. I didn't think about calling 911, but I wished that I had. But then I saw a house, just a couple of houses up, with a porch that had a bunch of plants on it. I remember hopping their little fence and jumping up on the porch. I skinned the shit out of my knee, and I was bleeding. But I didn't feel it until later on. Not 2 seconds after I hid behind their plants, he turned onto the main road and was creeping up the street. He had a flashlight and everything. It must have been 20 minutes that I sat on that porch, because he kept circling around. Shining and circling, shining and circling. He never saw me, though. And I was too afraid to move from the spot that I was in case he was hiding. I couldn't see much, just one corner, and then what was directly in front of me on the street. But then there were blue lights. I was so hoping that they were for him, but it ended up being someone else that they'd pull over. I waited a few seconds, stood up. Marcus was nowhere to be seen. I was 1.5 blocks from my house, so I booked it. My heart was pounding, and I was still crying, but I made it home. I locked the doors, ran to my room, and fell out, exhausted, and hoped that that was it. And it was. I never saw that creeper ever again. For context, at the time I was in the summer between my senior year of high school and my first year of college. My school started pretty late, so I was still at home with my dad in early September. It's just me and my dad at home, and we don't really celebrate holidays all too much. So when my dad told me he was going to his longtime girlfriend's for the weekend, bringing my shepherd mix with him, I wasn't too upset. If anything, I was looking forward to having the house to myself, eating whatever I wanted, and having my girlfriend over whenever. My dad lives in a sleepy beach town on the East Coast, in a pretty touristy area that's deserted in the winter, but gets really packed in the summertime, especially with wealthy big shots from the city. As a vacation town, we're pretty used to loud parties, but usually by Labor Day, all the bennies have just left. It was the night of Labor Day, and I had just gotten off a particularly difficult shift at work. I work at a vet and kennel, and even on holidays, someone needed to come in to take care of the animals. I made dinner, checked in with my dad, and tried to go to bed around 10 p.m., My block was pretty quiet, but there was one very loud party at the house 2 lots down from mine. It was loud enough where I, exhausted as I was, and notoriously good at falling asleep under any circumstance, would not sleep for the life of me. An hour or so passed like that, and I eventually decided to call my dad to see if he had my neighbor's phone number. He said that he didn't, and that even if he did, he wouldn't want me talking to the guy anyways. Apparently, he was a lovely combination of obnoxious, creepy, and entitled, and I was alone in the house. Great. He advised me to wait it out until midnight, and if it didn't show any signs of slowing down, to just call the police and have them asked to quiet it down. I expressed some concern for that being rude, but my dad assured me that it was normal and probably expected at loud late-night parties. Sure enough, when midnight rolled around, the party was loud as ever. I really did consider walking next door to politely ask him to turn it down, but as an 18-year-old female in pajamas alone at night, I didn't quite feel comfortable approaching a house full of drunk men, so I waited an extra few minutes just in case. And then I dialed the police. They showed up maybe 10 minutes later. I watched from my bedroom window as an officer casually walked up to the door and knocked. No one answered, so he walked around to the backyard where everyone was. I could see the yard from my room as well. They seemed to talk for a little while, and the party slowed down. Relieved, I went to sleep. Maybe 15 minutes later, I was woken up by music that I swear was even louder than what had been playing previously. I climbed out of bed, put on my robe, and checked my window. There were less people next door, but the party was definitely going again. Irritated, I didn't hesitate this time before phoning the police. I was speaking to someone different this time, and he asked me for my name in relation to the house. I expressed some concern because the lady earlier didn't ask for one, but he said this was procedure and that he wouldn't be told who called. So I told him. I waited yet again. The second time it was much the same. The police came, knocked, walked around, talked to the guy. The music was shut off, and after the cops left, it seemed like everyone else finally decided to leave. By now, it was maybe around 1:30 a.m. I went back to sleep. I'm woken in the middle of the night by a doorbell ringing. You should know for context that my dad's house is an old boathouse that must be at least 100 years old, and the doorbell is a literal bell, like a school bell. It sits on the wall at the top of the stairs. More context, the house is 2 stories, and the stairs are directly in front of the front door, meaning when you walk up to the door, there will be a wall to your left, an entrance to the bottom floor living room to your right, and the stairs directly in front of you. This also means that the stairs are the first thing that you see when you look through the glass. My bedroom is on that second floor. As was previously mentioned, I'm 18, but often get told that I look and sound much younger. In my senior year of high school, I got mistaken for a freshman by several freshmen when I offered them directions, and I stand about 5'5". On the night of Labor Day, I was wearing nothing but underwear and a short pink bathrobe. My family and even my dog were 2 hours south. I was probably the most vulnerable-looking person on earth. The thing with the doorbell is that he didn't just ring it. He was holding it down. Remember that terrible headache-inducing ringing from school fire drills? Imagine being woken up to that on repeat in the middle of the night. I climbed out of bed, put on my robe, and went to investigate, leaving my cell phone upstairs and not thinking to bring a weapon of any kind. I go to the top of the stairs, flick on my lights and the outside lights, and I see my neighbor standing outside, his fingers on the button and his face absolutely furious. Let's call this lovely man Dave. Dave is maybe 6 foot tall and easily over 200 pounds. He's bald, red in the face, clearly drunk. His face is so close to the glass pane in my door that I can see his breath on it. You would think that at this point I would go back upstairs and ignore him until he inevitably got bored. But at this point, I was pissed off. Here was this asshole, throwing parties and ringing my doorbell in the middle of the night, slobbering on my door, like I'm the one at fault. I put on my meanest face and stomped down the stairs. I don't know what possessed me to open the door. I really don't. Middle-aged white men make alarm bells go off in my head, and to be drunk on top of that, I blame being exhausted. So I unlock the door and open the door maybe 2 inches, and wonderful Dave gets his fingers in there and flings it open, slamming it onto my foot. He then steps one step into my foyer, the other foot still outside. I say something along the lines of, "What the fuck do you want?" And Dave starts screaming an inch from my face. This all might sound kind of comical at this point, but hear me out. I'm here, an 18-year-old female, with no one in the house, and my door is wide open. I'm in a bathrobe and nothing else, and my whole town is practically deserted, except for Dave's house, and a family friend on the next block. It is 2 a.m., and I have no phone, no weapon, and no space between me and the drunk, angry, screaming man spitting on my face. I stay silent for the time being, and Dave just continues on and on and on. Some of the things are less alarming. He can't believe the disrespect. My father will hear about this. Isn't he allowed to throw a party, etc.? Some, however, still make my hair stand on end. That he knows no one else is home, that no one can hear us, that I need to be taught a lesson. Comments about my body, my gender, about being a stupid, disrespectful little girl who couldn't stop anything he wanted to do to me. All the while I can feel him moving closer, trying to get his foot farther in, keeping his hold on the edge of the door. I'm not going to go into detail here, but I will tell you what I have some experience with drunk, violent men, and I knew to stay quiet and not provoke him until I had a plan. Don't let him know he scared you. And I was scared. I was so scared. And just try to stay calm and wait for an opportunity. The opportunity came. Marvelous Mr. Dave let go of the door and readjusted his weight to move his hand between my face. He didn't look like he was going to smack me, so maybe to grab my chin? Luckily, I never had to find out, because as soon as he wasn't putting force on the door, I stomped on his foot and tried to slam the door in his face. He stopped me very briefly, but he was drunk and I was full of adrenaline, so I still managed to close and lock it. I must have smacked his nose or something, because he stopped to clutch at his face and swear. But I didn't even get the chance to take satisfaction, because when he looked up and caught my eye, the look on his face made my blood run cold. He looked like he could have murdered me then and there. I've been through a lot of crazy shit, but that look absolutely froze me. Then he started running towards the side of the house. For more house context, there's 3 ways to get in. The front door that faces the stairs, where he had just had our face off. A back door that leads to a small fenced-off area where we let the dog out. And a side door a story up that leads to our, yes, upstairs kitchen, accessible through a flight of stairs up to a wood porch. I lock my doors about 99.9% of the time, but I didn't know for certain if I'd locked up that night, so when he started running, so did I. I got to the upstairs kitchen door well before him, being young, sober, and desperate, and confirmed to make sure that it was locked. It was. It's a sliding glass door, and since the indoor lights were off, I could see him coming up the stairs a good 20 seconds after I checked it. Dave starts yelling and tries to bang on the door with his bare hands. He does this less than half a dozen times. However, as it probably did hurt, he did keep yelling. I start slowly backing away from him and stand in the doorway, watching him, watching me. At this point, Dave gets quiet. It's unsettling for a few reasons. One, he's watching me through my door in the middle of the night, and my robe was probably falling off of me from my sprint through the house. And he still has that absolutely furious, murderous look in his face. 2, Dave is never quiet. I don't know him well, but I know that he's one of those guys. I don't know what he was thinking about, and I don't think I want to. Or maybe he was just in a drunken stupor. Who knows? I start considering my options for one very specific reason. The back door doesn't lock. In our defense, we live in a very quiet neighborhood where very little has ever happened. If I knew for a fact that friendly neighbor Dave knew about the door's existence, I would have run to it and maybe tried the chair at the handle trick, or something like that. However, it was also very possible that Dave didn't know that it existed. Like I said, it was at the back of the house, within a fenced-off area with some pretty heavy brush, not immediately visible. Also, the fence runs along the edge of my other neighbor on the other side of the block's property, and it looks from afar like it's a fence separating the 2 properties. Additionally, Dave's house is really only his summer house. He and his family spend most of the year in the big city. from what I can tell at least. And he spent so much of the summer and completely wasted that I can't really see him making any impressive observations. Again, this is hard to explain, but this part of the night had to be the scariest for me, by far. Him staring at me staring at him, knowing if he runs for the door, there might be nothing that I can do to stop him from getting in. But if I run for the door, he'll know for sure that it exists, if he doesn't already. My phone is still in my bedroom, and I'm scared to leave the kitchen doorway in case he runs while I'm gone, and I have no time to prepare. It's just a waiting game. After what might have been 20 minutes, but was probably about 5, Dave turns around and leaves, just like that. I hear him walking down the wood steps from my porch to the side lawn, slowly and calmly. I run downstairs as fast as I can to get to the side door just in case. But he never comes. Instead, he walks to my front door, holds down my doorbell for maybe 30 seconds out of spite, and walks home. I run back up to my room, watch him disappear into the house like nothing happened. The hysterics start somewhere around here. I think, and my memory is a little fuzzy from this point. I remember leaning against the wall and dramatically sliding down like in movies, sitting on the floor, fingers shaking while calling my dad, unable to speak to the point where I could barely communicate that I was safe, but that something had just happened. My dad told me he'd be right there, and made the 2-hour drive in a little more than an hour, while I went downstairs and sat on the washing machine, facing the back door that didn't lock. I was still exhausted, even more so by then, but every time I felt myself nod off, I got that image of Dave's murderous face and would jump awake. For a reason I don't really understand, I didn't call the police at this time. My dad and his girlfriend got there around maybe 3:30 a.m. with my dog, brought me upstairs, sat me on the couch to tell them everything. I didn't exactly. I told them vaguely that he had forced the door open and threatened me, and ended the story there. My dad asked me why I'd been in the laundry room when they came in, and apparently all I said was, "There's no lock." This is basically where the story ends. I fell asleep on the couch with my dad's girlfriend watching over me, and the next morning, the three of us went to the police station to report the incident. After I found out a few things, one was that as soon as I fell asleep, my dad walked to Dave's house and rang the much nicer doorbell until his wife answered. He then demanded she wake up Dave, and told Dave that he was going to take a walk with him. He refused, and his adult son smacked my dad in the face and threw him out. The next was something that I found out at the police station. At the time, I wasn't really worried about why Dave came to my house, just that he was there. The officer that we talked to, however, who I had known since I was 6, was absolutely furious, and later called to tell us that Dave had asked a younger officer, who called so that he could go over and apologize, and the officer gave him not only my name, but my address too. We wouldn't take any legal action against Dave given my minimizing account, and the fact that he had way more money for lawyers than us. He's an exec out of a major global investing firm, but I take comfort in knowing that now the police get called every time Dave has a small afternoon barbecue, and they come over every time. Call me petty, but I take pleasure in the small stuff. I haven't told anyone the full story yet, of racing Dave to the door, wondering how long I had until he got in. There isn't much more to tell, except for the minor details that we finally installed a lock on our back door, and that I go to school on the other side of the country now. But regardless, Dave, for your sake, I'm definitely going to be prepared next time if you decide to try anything. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, like, and hit the bell for notifications on future videos, and become a stalker of the night. And I'll see you next time.